والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين
ما شاء الله
المذلومين المنتخبين المنتجبين الذين كلامهم نور وأمرهم رشد ووصيتهم التقوى وفعلهم الخير وعادتهم الإحسان وسجيتهم الكرم. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله وعلى أهل بيتك المظلومين. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة. ما خاب من تمسك بكم أمنا من لجأ والتجأ إليكم. يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز فوزا عظيما. ورد عن أبي عبد الله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه خط الموت على ولد آدم مخد القلادة على جيد الفتاة. صلى على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
When a person looks at the riwayat of Ahlul Bayt alayhi wassalatu wassalam in regards to death, you will find that Ahlul Bayt salawatullahi wassalamu alayhim ajma'een have compared death in a number of different ways. For example, the Prophet of Islam Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam gives the example of a piece of clothing that is on my shoulders, like this abba that rests on my shoulders. He says, imagine you have this piece of clothing, each and every single thread on that clothing from the middle has been torn except for one piece of thread. And the only thing that keeps this item of clothing, this cloak on my shoulders, is that one thread which remains. As soon as that thread disappears and detaches itself, that piece of clothing shall fall onto the ground. He says this is the example of the life of the human being and the death of the human being. Or for example, we have the idea of death being the response of one friend to another. In the way that when your friend invites you towards him, how lovingly do you accept? That is the example of the death of a mu'min. Likewise, the narrations speak about when a person is passing by a beautiful garden and sees a number of flowers there. He goes towards one of those flowers. He finds a fragrance within it. And as he begins to smell the fragrance of the flower, that is the example of the death of a believer. How easy it is, how they find ease when they smell the fragrance of that flower. And so we find a number of different examples given in regards to the reality of death for the human being and for the mu'min. And one of the most beautiful examples you found given in the ahadith of Ahlul Bayt is that which I have quoted from Abu Abdullah al-Hussain salawatullahi wa sallam. Where the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam says, "Khutta al-maut ala wuldi Adam." If you want to understand what death is for the human being, he says death is qalada ala jid al-fatat. And I wish to look at what this means. What is meant by qalada ala jid al-fatat? And when is it that Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam mentioned this statement? And what was he telling me and you about his own death? And so a number of questions arise in analyzing this statement of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. The first question that arises is that why is it when I look at the narrations of Ahlul Bayt and when I look at Quranul Kareem, I find so much emphasis and stress on the idea of remembrance of death? Why is it when I look at the lives of Ahlul Bayt alayhim wassalatu wassalam themselves, I find the constant remembrance of death? And so why is it I'm told to constantly remember it? What is the benefit that I gain when I ponder upon the reality of maut and the afterlife? And a number of answers were given to this question. Of those is that one of the greatest benefits of me and you pondering upon death, which is why there is such an emphasis in riwayat for me and you to do so, is that there are a number of problems I find today in my life. One person finds they have a problem of greed. Another person finds that they have a problem of arrogance and ego. A third person finds that their heart goes towards the dunya. When I look at a number of spiritual illnesses that are found in the world, and certain spiritual vices that are found in my own soul, we are told one of the best ways to treat those spiritual illnesses is to remember death. And so death was a medicine for a number of problems that I had in my life. If I found myself having a problem of greed, think about the death in the next one. If I found myself to be arrogant and have a problem of ego, think about your death. Likewise, if my heart is going towards dunya, ponder upon the next world. And so this is why there was such an emphasis found in the riwayat, and why so often the imams would come forward and tell us about death in different ways. The second reason we're told to constantly ponder upon this reality is to remind me and you that that which we are searching for can never be found here. Meaning what? Meaning the human being today has certain desires. You have certain goals in your life. You have certain things that you wish to reach. We were told, remember and ponder upon the reality of death so that you don't look for those things in this world. What do I mean? Quran al-Kareem mentions the story of the traveler who most likely wasn't a prophet of God by the name of Dhul Qarnayn. Dhul Qarnayn, Quran al-Kareem says, traveled to the most easternly point of the earth, traveled to the most westernly point of the earth, and he traveled somewhere in between. So there are three travels of Dhul Qarnayn which Quran al-Kareem and history mention. When Dhul Qarnayn travels, why does he travel? He travels to do tabligh. He travels to preach tawheed to the people. On one of those journeys, Dhul Qarnayn is a king. A king has soldiers. A king has thousands of people with him when he travels. So Dhul Qarnayn is traveling with thousands of soldiers, thousands of horses, thousands of men. Until some of the riwayat say that Dhul Qarnayn passes by a certain town or city. Now naturally, if thousands of people are going through this city of yours, everyone's attention will be on them. Who is it? Where are they going? With what goal have they entered through our town or city? So Dhul Qarnayn says wherever we would go, whenever we would travel, all of the people's eyes would be upon us. He says a certain place we passed by, all of the eyes of that city were upon us. As we were traveling on the outskirts of this city, we passed by a person in sujood, in prostration. Now imagine you are in prostration in sujood in this masjid. and the masjid is empty and all of a sudden 10 people enter in, what's the first thing you wish to do? You wish to raise your head, turn around and see who is it. All of a sudden 10 people have entered into this masjid. Dhul Qarnayn says thousands of us passed by, this person's head remained in sujood. His head remained in sajda and prostration. Dhul Qarnayn all of a sudden says, stop, take me off my horse. So he gets off his horse. He goes closer to that person who's still in prostration and sajda. He sees it's a young boy, a youth. He calls out to him. It's only when he calls out to him that the narration says the youth lifts his head from sajda. He looks at Dhul Qarnayn. So Dhul Qarnayn says, why is it that all of us passed by and your head remained in sujood? So he gave a very simple answer. He said, yes, you passed by, but I'm in conversation with my Lord. I'm worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I don't care who is around me. So Dhul Qarnayn is a person of God. When he sees someone's ibadah and worship is like this, he says, I wish for you to accompany you on my journeys. My journeys are to bring people towards haqq, to bring people towards tawheed. I want someone like you with me. So that youth says, if you can give me a number of things, I'll come with you. He says, what is it that you desire? He says, I want happiness and I never want grief. He says, I want health and I never wish to have sickness. And I wish to have youth and I never wish to have old age. Can you give this to me? So Dhul Qarnayn says, how can I give that to you? So then the youth says, leave me with the one that can give me all of these things. For all of those things are not to be found in this world. If there is happiness, the happiness is temporary. If there is health, very quickly it turns into sickness. If there is youthfulness, very quickly it turns into old age. We were told, remember death so that you remember this reality. What you are searching for is not in this world. Do not expect to find it in this world. What you are searching for is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so to answer my first question, this is why there was such an emphasis in riwayat, and why Imam Hussain himself mentions death and reminds us about this reality. The second question then that arises is, when is it that Sayyid al-Shuhada mentioned this statement? خَطَّ الْمَوْتِ عَلَى وُلْدِ عَادٍ خَطَّ الْقِلَادِ عَلَى جِيدِ الْفَتَاةِ. When did he mention this? When you look at the statements of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam, as he leaves Madinatul Munawwara and eventually ends up in Karbala, we find that the sermons of Sayyid al-Shuhada are of two types. And if a person wishes to analyze what takes place in the journey towards Karbala, they need to be aware of these two different types of sermon. For one type of sermon that Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salatu wasalam gave from Medina and Mecca and then towards Iraq, are those sermons that he gave in response to what people asked him. So someone has come, he's asked the Imam a certain question, in response to that he's given a sermon. This is one type. The second type of sermon is that which he hasn't given in response to a question that he has been asked. Rather, he himself has initiated the sermon. And this is of a different type. For in the first type, someone asked a question, I responded. In the second type, no. Sayyid al-Shuhada himself deemed it important to speak about this topic in front of the people. And this statement that I have quoted is of the second type. For we are told when Sayyid al-Shuhada leaves Madinatul Munawwara, he enters into Mecca during these very days that have just passed. He places on the ihram with the intention of performing Hajj. As we know, before the day of Arafah comes, Sayyid al-Shuhada changes his Hajj into a Umrah Mufrada, performs the Umrah and then begins to leave. As he begins to leave Meccatul Mukarramah, قام خطيبا. He stands and he gives a sermon, and the first line of the sermon is this. The first thing he says to the people, he says, "O people, understand this, that death is like qilada ala jid al-fatat." And after mentioning this, he takes his journey onwards towards Karbala. If this has been understood, the third question, what then is qilada ala jid al-fatat? What is this that he is comparing death to? When you look at the word qalada or qallada in Arabic, Literally it means that which is around a person's neck. Quran al-Kareem sometimes uses this word or a similar word to refer to animals that are sacrificed. Why? Because when you take an animal to sacrifice it in Hajj, what do? You tie a rope around its neck and bring it with you. Likewise, what is the name for emulating and following a jurist? Taqleed. Because it's as if I have put all of my affairs and responsibilities on their neck. That they give me the fatwa, they are answerable on the day of Qiyamah. Qallada or qalada either refers to that which goes around a person's neck or that which is placed around someone's neck. Here then, when the Imam says, death for the human being is like qilada. Qilada refers to a very expensive item of jewelry or a necklace. A necklace that goes around, as he says, a necklace that goes around the neck of a very youthful woman or a young girl. Death is like this. Not any type of necklace. In Arabic, qilada usually refers to a necklace that is covered with jewels. That is very expensive. And so in the beginning of this khutbah, he says that death for the human being is like a necklace that has wrapped around the neck of a young girl. If these three questions have been understood, the fourth question is why? Why is it that Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salatu wasalam says that death is like a necklace around the neck of this young girl? What exactly is he referring to? And here we find a number of answers have been given by the scholars in regards to what Sayyid al-Shuhada was trying to tell me earlier. Number one, the first answer is given that in the way that when that necklace is wrapped around the neck of the young girl, there is not even one place in which the necklace is not touched by the neck. There is nothing that remains except that it is covered by the necklace. Likewise, the Imam was saying, no human being shall be saved from the reality of death. This necklace wraps around the neck completely, that no part of the neck remains untouched by it. Likewise, no human being is safe from the reality of death. This was one idea. The second idea that the scholars gave was no. Rather, Sayyid al-Shuhada salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi was pointing to us towards the reality that when you have a young daughter, and you have bought for this young daughter of yours a beautiful necklace, and you place it around her neck, what is her reaction to that? What is the reaction of a young daughter when she gets a gift from her father? A gift that is expensive and beautiful. The reaction is very simple. That will bring nothing but happiness and joy. Sayyid al-Shuhada says the reality of death is happiness and joy for the mu'min. And I'll give you this example. For the mu'min, it is nothing but happiness and joy. In the way that this young girl is excited and happy that my father has given me such a gift, for the human being and the believer, they are happy and joyous when they are taken to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is a scholar who lived in the last 100 years by the name of Sayyid Muhammad Fishariki. Sayyid Muhammad Fishariki is not well known amongst the masses because he was a very sincere and God-fearing scholar. And maybe some of you have heard of the great scholar in recent times by the name of Mirza al-Naimi, the teacher of Ayatollah al-Uzma Khoi. Sayyid Fishariki was his teacher. Sayyid Fishariki was so pure in his life that when his teacher passed away, Sheikh Abdul Karim al-Hariri, Sayyid Fishariki was in Najaf, and at one point he was also in Samarra. When his teacher passed away, Sheikh Abdul Karim al-Hariri, Sayyid Fishariki was seen in the funeral procession of his teacher. His eyes were completely red. So you think, why are his eyes completely red during the funeral procession of his teacher? Because he's been crying. But no, the amount that he was crying was much more than expected. When your teacher passes away, you're upset, you cry. But what we saw in his eyes was something else. So when his teacher passed away and they go to the funeral procession, And Sayyid Fisharaki is standing in the funeral procession of his teacher. We see his eyes are completely red. His students asked him afterwards. He said, why is it that you are crying to such an extent? Why is it that this is your state? Is it because your teacher has passed away? He says, of course I was upset that my teacher has passed away. And I want to explain to you what type of person it is before I show you the happiness that death brought him. He says, yes, I was upset and I was crying because my teacher has passed away. However, something entered into my heart yesterday night. When my teacher passed away, what did I think? I was very upset. I found a bit of happiness in my heart. So I went searching in my heart. Why am I happy that today my ustad and my teacher has passed away? And when I searched in my heart, I realized the answer. Yes, I was upset that he was passed away. The happiness in my heart was because now I believe that the marji'iyya of the Hawza would come to me. He says, as soon as I found this small ounce of love of marji'iyya and leadership in my heart, I ran to the shrine of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam. And all night I have done nothing but cry to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam, telling him, remove the love of leadership in my heart. Until the day he died, he never announced marji'iyya. People didn't even know him because he wished to remain sincere. So this Sayyid Fisharaki, his student, as I told you, was Mirza Naini. These are giants of the Shia seminary and the Shia school. When he was about to pass away, Mirza Naini, his student, said to him, look, when a person passes away, depending on their status in the next world, they are given certain privileges in Barzakh. Meaning what? Meaning a normal believer is allowed to visit the house of their family members every Thursday night. A normal average believer is given the permission to leave their station in Barzakh, come to the house of their family and see what their family are doing and visit their family on a Thursday. If a believer is of a slightly higher level, they can come, for example, every single day and visit where they wish to visit. If they have reached a certain level, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows them to enter into the dreams of their beloved. So these are all different stations that you get depending on the barzakh. Mirza Naini says, when you pass away, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows, come in my dream and tell me what happened. Come in my dream and tell me what is your state in the next world. Sayyid Fisharaki says, no problem. Now Sayyid Fisharaki was scared of death. Why? Not because he doesn't wish to meet his Lord, because he had two issues. The first issue that he has is that he is in debt to the local baker. He doesn't have enough money to buy the daily necessities and essentials, so he takes a loan every so often from the local baker. He says, I'm worried that I will die without having paid back this loan. This is one thing. He says, number two, whilst I'm alive, I'm able to provide for my family, my daughters and my wife. As soon as I leave this world, who will provide for my family? I'm not a wealthy man. I'm alim deen, mujtahid, a simple person. Who will provide for my family? This is because of these two reasons. Whenever I thought about my death, I was in a state of grief. What did I tell you? Sayyid al-Shuhada says, in the way that that girl gains joy and happiness as soon as that necklace is placed around her neck. This is what happens to the mu'min as soon as they leave to the next world. Sayyid Fisharaki says, these two reasons are why I fear death, the loan that I need to pay off, and who will take care of my family members. He passes away. He passes away, there's 3 days mourning in Najaf al-Ashraf. Shops are closed during the day of his funeral procession. Mirza Naini says, I waited. I waited to see if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shall allow him to enter into my dream and tell me the state he is in the next world. I waited for a number of days. And as we know, certain dreams have truth behind them. It says, after a number of days, in my dream I saw the barzakhi state of Mirza Fisharaki, my teacher. But he's not looking towards me. He's facing another direction. In the dream I came towards him, I said, Oh my teacher, he looked away. Looked away meaning what? Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't given him permission yet that he can speak with me in the barzakh. I called out a second time. When I called out a second time again, he looked in the other direction. The third time that I called out to him, he looked towards me. He said, "Oh Mirza Naini, I was very fearful of my death. As soon as the soul leaves the body, and I began to become fearful about the loans that I have about my family, suddenly I saw that my soul is covered in nur and light. And I have never felt happiness like that before. And I have never felt joy like that before until this moment in time. I have found nothing but happiness in the next one."
Inshallah.
Mirza Naini says, I woke up. I wanted to see what has happened. He had those two problems. What happened in regards to those problems? A necklace is a gift from a father to her daughter. Death for the mu'min is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mirza Naini says, I went first to the baker. And I know that my teacher owes him 6 tuman, for example. I went there. I said, "Did you hear that Mirza Fisharaki has passed away?" He says, "Of course, everyone knows that Mirza Fisharaki has passed away. All of Najaf was mourning for this great scholar." He says, "Didn't he owe you money?" He says, "Yes. He owed me 6 dirham, 6 tuman, whatever it may have been." And this was in my mind. As soon as his funeral procession began and it passed by my shop, in my heart I made the intention and niyyah that I remove him of all of his debts. So Sayyid Fisharaki, when he says, "First, when I was leaving this world, I felt there was a darkness. All of a sudden there was a light," that was the exact moment that this person forgave him of all of his debts. What was the second thing that he was worried about? His family, his children. He says, "I went to the house of Mirza Fisharaki. I knocked on his door. His wife opened. I said, 'How is your state after your husband has passed away?' He was bringing in some sort of money. 'What is your state now?' So she says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works in wondrous ways. After he passed away, someone had come from Isfahan. Fisharaki is from Isfahan. Someone had come from Isfahan to Najaf al-Ashraf to do ziyarah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullahi wa sallam. To do ziyarah of the Holy Imam. Then he came to our house. When he came to our house, he knocked on the door. I opened it. He said, "Where is Sayyid Fisharaki?" I said, "Don't you know Sayyid Fisharaki has died a number of days ago?" So he says, "I had bought this certain amount of money as a gift for him. This is neither sadaqah, no khums, no zakat, no radul madhalim, gift." So she says, "He's passed away." He says, "I give this to his family so that you can use it for your expenditure." Both of the issues that he was worried about, death resolved both of them, because Sayyid al-Shuhada says, for you as a believer, it is nothing but happiness and joy. This is the second reason. The third reason why Sayyid al-Shuhada says that death for a believer and for the human being is like this necklace, is because this necklace does nothing but increase the beauty of this young girl. This young daughter, when she is given a necklace, why does she take that necklace? Because it increases her beauty. Likewise, for me and you, Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam says death is nothing but beauty, which is life. Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salatu wasalam on the day of Ashura, he explains the state of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. He says, "Lamma ishtadda al-amru bil-Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam, nadhara ilayhi man kana ma'ah." When things became very difficult in Karbala, meaning when more bodies fell on the ground, when Sayyid al-Shuhada had to pick up more bodies, nadhara ilayhi man kana ma'ah. Those who were left amongst Sayyid al-Shuhada looked at the face of Hussain. فَإِذَا هُوَ بِخِلَافِهِمْ. They noticed that our state is completely opposite to the state of Hussain. Meaning what? When things became more difficult, Zayn al-Abidin says people's faces lost color. They began to shake out of what is happening. We saw Imam Hussain be the complete opposite. Sayyid al-Shuhada alayhi salatu wasalam, the more bodies he picked up, the more his face was radiant with Iman. The more we saw that Sayyid al-Shuhada understands that death is nothing but beauty and honor for Abu Abdullah. The fourth reason why Imam al-Hussain, as he leaves Mecca, says that death for Ibn Adam is like this necklace, because where is it that a necklace is placed? On a person's neck. Scholars said this was Hussain ibn Ali telling me and you from before, I know how I will be killed. I know that it will be my neck that is separated from me. Ask Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. Sometimes we would find in riwayat, in their last moments, Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam would be crying during the time of death. Many of them would be asked, why is it that you cry during your last moments? They would say it's not because of fear of what will take place, it is because of firaqul ahibba. Firaqul ahibba means the separation of your beloved ones. For that which is most difficult in this world is separation from your beloved. And today we come to remember someone who was beloved to so many people. The wounds of separation can only be healed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. And I say that for this 22-year-old youth that you have gathered to remember. It is enough to say, كَانَ زَائِرًا لِأَبِي عَبْدِ. My memory of him is this. A Za'ir of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain during the time of Arba'in, this is enough for his salvation in the next world. Firaqul ahibba is very difficult. For Sayyid al-Shuhada, what are his worries? Not that he is about to leave this world. His worries is that he is about to leave Zainab and Kulthum. And what was most difficult for his family members was separation from Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam. That on one occasion, Imam al-Rida alayhi salatu wasalam is sitting, and Di'bal enters into the house. Di'bal, the poet of Ahlul Bayt, he enters, and as soon as Imam al-Rida sees him, he says, have you written anything for my grandfather Hussain? Di'bal says, Ya ibn Rasulillah, how would I come to you without having written lines of poetry for your grandfather Abu Hussain? And so immediately Imam al-Rida says, prepare a majlis. He places a covering like this cap covering. His women would sit on one side. A member is placed. Imam al-Rida would sit on the floor. He would place Di'bal on the member. He would say, Di'bal, recite these lines of poetry so we can remember. Firaqul ahibba is very difficult. And so Di'bal would recite these eternal lines where he says, Madarisu ayati khalayt min tilawati مغفر العرسات ديار علي والحسين وجعفر وحمزة والسجاد ذي الثفلات. Di'bal would say the houses where revelation would descend. Now these houses are empty. قبور بكوفة وأخرى بطيبة وأخرى بفخ لها صلواتي وقبر ببغداد لنفس زكية. Di'bal would say, Ahlul Bayt, how oppressed are they that they could not even be buried in one place. There is one buried in Najaf and one buried in Karbala. البنت scattered. There is one in Baghdad. Then Di'ban would say, فاطم لو خلت الحسين وجدنا وقد مات عطشانا بشت فراتي. Oh Fatima, what would happen to you if you saw Hussein in his last moments? Dahra, you would beat your face and beat your chest. توفوا طاشا بالفرات وليتني توفيت فيهم قبل حين وفاتي. Dabbar says if a person dies thirsty in the middle of the desert when there is no water, this isn't something strange, but to die thirsty next to the Furat, this is something strange. Then he would say one line. When he says this one line, Imam Rida begins to cry uncontrollably. He says, قصور نساء زياد في القصور مسونتون وآل رسول الله بالفلوات. He says the women of Ziyad are safe in their palaces. Zainab and Kulthum are prisoners. Suddenly Imam al-Rida says, oh Di'ban, can I complete this poetry for you? Di'ban says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, yes. Imam al-Rida says, you said one is buried in Najaf, one in Karbala. There are those in Medina and one in Baghdad. Imam al-Rida would say, وَقَبْرٌ بِطُوسٍ يَعْلَهَا مِنْ مُصِيبَتِينَ. And there is one buried in Khurasan. Di'ban says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, which of you have been buried in Khurasan? Imam al-Rida says, a time will come where I am all alone, and I shall be poisoned in doors away from my family. Suddenly the servant of the house comes running. He says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, stop mentioning how you will be killed. Why? Because one of your sisters behind the curtain has fainted hearing your shahada. I say, oh sister of Imam al-Rida, you just heard how your brother would be killed. Zainab says, I saw sit on the chest of Hussain. لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إلى هذا الحسين الوجيه وجده وأبيه وأمه وأخيه والتسعة المعصومين من ذريته وبني اغفر لأوليائنا وكف عنا أعداءنا واشغلهم من أذانا وأدهر كلمة الحق واجعلها العليا وأدهر كلمة الباطل واجعلها السفلى إنك على كل شيء قدير. Please come and recite Surah Al-Fatiha and 3 times Surah Al-Ikhlas for Sheikh Waseem and Hassan. Mudassir al-Hassan والمرحومين. فاتحة.